Today we're going to go over 2 ways to solve time problems. And the most important thing to remember when you're working with time is that we are now working with the number 60 because there's 60 seconds in 1 minute and there's 60 minutes in an hour. So we're always working with 60 instead of 100 like we do with a lot of our other math problems. And then just remember that we are focusing on regrouping in base 60, and I know that's a new concept and idea for you guys, but I know you all know how to regroup in base 10, and it's the same exact process, it's just with the number 60 instead of 10. So if you can remember how to regroup in base 10, then you'll be good for regrouping in base 60. So again, just always remember that we are working with 60 when we are working with time. So the first way I'm going to show you to solve a problem is by regrouping in base 60, and it's called the Make 60 approach. And so remember, if you know how to regroup in base 10, then you'll be good to go for regrouping in base 60. So we're going to start off by reading our first word problem, and it says, suppose it is 10:30 a.m. How many minutes until it is 12:45 p.m.? So like with any word problem, I'm going to start by writing down our time. So it gives us a start time of 10:30 a.m. And it's always important to put either a.m. or p.m. because it affects time when you're working with it in a.m. or p.m. And so for the Make 60 approach, your goal is to always get the time given to the nearest hour. And so looking at 10:30, we know that the nearest hour would be 11 a.m. And we know that the difference, or in order to get from 10:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. is 30 minutes. So now that we got it to the nearest hour, we're now working with 11, and we can all work with 11 because it's easy to work with because it's at the hour 11. And so it is asking us how many minutes until 12:45 p.m. So we're trying to get to 12:45 p.m. Well, since we're working with 11, we can easily go up by 1 hour. We know 1 hour from 11 will be 12. And remember, when you get to 12 or noon, it becomes 12 p.m. instead of a.m. because you're now reaching the afternoon. And this is important to remember. And so, looking at 11 and 12, we know the time difference is 1 hour. But we're going to be working in minutes because our problem is asking how many minutes. And so we know 1 hour is 60 minutes. And we look back at our problem, and we need to get to 12:45 p.m., and we're at 12 p.m. Well, we know we can't jump another hour because then we would be passing 12:45 p.m. But we know in order to get from 12 p.m. to 12:45 p.m., we just need to go up by 45 minutes. And so that's how much time has passed. And now we have reached our ending time, and so now we have our minutes that it took to get to 12:45. So now we need to add the 3 minutes we have, and we have 30 and 60, and we can all add 30 and 60 pretty easily because we know that's 90. So now we need to do 90 in our last number, which is 45. And remember, you don't always have to do this in your head. If you need to, you can go ahead and draw it on the side and put it into your problem to be able to add. And so we get 135. So we know there is 135 minutes until we get to 12:45 p.m. So this is the Make 60 approach, and remember your main focus is to get your first time to the closest hour. And then we're always working with 60, and remember, if you can regroup in base 10, then you will have no problem regrouping in base 60. So we're going to go ahead and look at one more problem and one more way to solve a time problem. And so I made 2 different word problems, and they're both very common word problems that you will see when you're encountering time. So this one asks how many minutes until the next time, and it gives you the 2 times. And the next problem that we're going to look at is going to ask us to go backwards and figuring out a time. So this problem is, Susie arrived at her soccer game at 5:30 p.m. And so we notice here they're giving us the end time of 5:30 p.m. And it tells us that the car ride was 3 hours and 15 minutes long. What time did she leave for her soccer game? So we have to actually go back and find the beginning time using the end time and the minutes between both. And so for this one, we're actually going to be working backwards to figure out what time Susie left to get to her game. And so we did the Make 60 approach, so now I'm going to show you how to use a linear model, and we just use a timeline for this. And so I'm going to get out our timeline, and we already have a pre-made timeline, and as you can see, it has 12 and 12 because we have two 12s in our day, and then it has all the other hours. And so the most important thing when you're working with the timeline is you want to identify which 12 is AM and which 12 is PM, because it does affect the time. So if we look back at our problem, it says 5:30 p.m. So I know I want to be working in the afternoon, so I'm going to go ahead and label my first 12 p.m. and then my last 12 will be 12 a.m. And so when we're working with the timeline, just like we do with any other timeline, you always want to mark your time given, and they gave us the time of 5:30. So we know we're in PM, so we go and find 5. And then we see that between 5 and 6, we have the intervals 15, 30, and 45. And we know that when we work with time, we always work in the intervals of 15. So 15, 30, 45, and then 60, which is when the new hour begins. And so we find 5, and it says 5:30, so we go to the first interval, that's 5:15. So we go one more, and that's 5:30. So now we've marked our given time, and it's telling us that her car ride was 3 hours and 15 minutes. Well, we know how to easily jump 3 hours. So we're going to start off by jumping 1 hour back at a time. So if we're at 5:30 and we want to go back 1 hour, we know we have to jump from 5:30 to 4:30. And then we know that 1 hour has passed. So now we still need to do 2 more hour jumps. So if we're at 4:30 and we want to jump back 1 hour, we know we jump from 4:30 to 3:30, and then that's another hour. So now we've been in the car for 2 hours, but it says that Susie was there for 3 hours and 15 minutes, so we need to make 1 more hour jump, and we know that if we start at 3:30 and we're jumping back 1 hour, we need to jump back to 2:30. So now we look back and we have jumped 3 hours, so our remaining time is 15 minutes. If we look at this, our time is now at 2:30. And if we remember, we work with time in intervals of 15. So 15, 30, 45, and then 60, which is the next hour. So if we're at 2:30 and we need to go back 15 minutes, we know that 30 minus 15 is 15. So we jump to the 15 mark. We've gone back 15 minutes. And we have now done 1, 2, 3 hours and 15 minutes, which is what the problem states. So now we know we are at our beginning time. So we can answer the question by saying that Susie left her house at 2:15 p.m. in order to get to her soccer game at 5:30 p.m. So these are just 2 common ways to solve time problems. And just remember, with time, we're always working with 60. And if you can remember that, then you guys should be good.